The beast enchains the air inside the alien facility was cold and heavy. Filled with the smell of metal and strange chemicals, Ethan moved slowly through the dim corridors, his boots making no sound against the smooth black floor. He had come here for a mission steal, a data chip from the alien command center, and leave without being seen. But now he was hearing something that made his heart beat faster. It was a sound he could not ignore, deep, pained growl, mixed with something that sounded almost like a cry. He followed the sound, his flashlight cutting through the shadows. The corridor ended in a massive chamber, and in the center of that chamber, it stood, a creature unlike anything he had seen before. It was huge, its head brushing the top of the chamber. Its body was a terrifying mix of flesh and machine. Thick black wires ran into its spine and out of its neck, glowing with a faint red light. Metal plates covered half of its face, hiding one eye behind a steel visor, while the other eye strangely looked alive. And in that living eye, Ethan saw fear. The beast was chained to a steel platform, its legs bound by heavy cuffs. It pulled at them weakly, each movement sending a ripple of pain through its body. Ethan could see marks where the chains had cut into its skin. Alien machines stood around it, their arms moving slowly. Injecting something into the wires, the beast shivered each time. It wasn't just trapped, it was being controlled. Ethan pressed himself behind a pillar, watching as two alien guards in dark armor walked past. They spoke in a language he didn't understand, but the tone was cold, almost mocking. One of them jabbed the beast with a long electric spear, making it roar. Ethan's hands tightened into fists. He had seen cruelty before, but something about this, something about the way the beast looked at him, made it different. He checked his watch. He was running out of time. The data chip was somewhere deeper in the facility, and his extraction point wouldn't wait forever. But he didn't move. The beast's breathing was heavy now, slow and uneven. It closed its eye for a moment, as if giving up. Ethan swallowed hard. He knew it was dangerous. He knew the creature could tear him apart in seconds if freed. But he also knew that no living thing deserved to be treated like this. He stepped out from behind the pillar, moving closer. The beast's eye opened and locked onto him. For a moment, neither moved. The red glow from the wires flickered slightly. "You don't belong here, do you?" Ethan whispered, though he knew it wouldn't understand. Still, the beast stopped pulling at its chains, almost listening. Ethan glanced at the control console nearby. The display was covered in alien symbols, but one thing was clear: there were power lines leading from it to the wires in the beast's body. He followed the lines with his eyes until they reached a bundle of thick, glowing cables near the creature's neck. He hesitated. One wrong move, and the alarm would sound. One wrong move, and the beast could turn on him. But his instincts told him this was the right thing to do. He took out his survival knife, its blade shining faintly in the red light. The beast watched his every move, its breathing quickening. Ethan stepped onto the platform, careful not to make a sound. The metal was warm under his boots. Up close, he could see the wires were embedded deep into the beast's skin. Small sparks ran through them every few seconds, making the creature's muscles twitch. His knife hovered over the first wire. The beast's eye followed the motion. There was no growl now, only a deep, steady gaze. "All right, here we go," he murmured. With one quick motion, he sliced through the first wire. The red glow flickered violently, and the beast let out a low rumble, not of anger, but something else. He cut the second, then the third. Each time, the creature's body shook, the metal plates shifting slightly, as if loosening, and then he cut the last wire. For a second, everything went silent. The machines around them stopped moving, their lights blinking off. Ethan stepped back, breathing hard. The beast lowered its head. its muscles relaxing for the first time, until a sudden deafening roar shattered the air. The creature's eyes burst into a blinding red glow. Its chains snapped like paper, metal shards flying across the chamber. The ground shook under Ethan's feet. He stumbled back, his heart racing. The beast stood free now, its massive frame towering over him. Its breath came in hot, sharp bursts. And for the first time, Ethan realized just how huge it was. It turned its head toward him, teeth bared. Ethan's grip tightened on his knife, ready for whatever came next. From somewhere in the facility, an alarm began to howl, and Ethan knew whatever he had just done, there was no turning back now. Freedom turns to chaos. Alarm's howl was like a dagger in Ethan's ears. Flashing red lights flooded the chamber, casting long, jagged shadows across the walls. The beast took one massive step forward, and the floor trembled beneath Ethan's boots. It didn't charge, not yet, but its gaze was locked on him, burning with a red fire that hadn't been there before. Ethan kept his knife raised, his breath slow, easy. "I'm not here to hurt you," he muttered, though his voice was tight. But the beast's ears twitched at the sound of voices approaching deep. Barking alien orders from the corridor outside, the creature's head turned, and without warning, it spun toward the noise. Its roar shook the metal beams above. The first alien guard appeared at the doorway. Weapon raised, before he could even aim, the beast lunged. Chains still hanging from its limbs clanged like war drums as it slammed into the soldier, crushing him against the wall with a sickening crunch. The second guard fired a burst of green plasma, but the energy bolts only scorched the beast's metal plating. It swiped a massive claw, sending the alien flying into one of the humming machines. Sparks exploded and the lights flickered. Ethan stood frozen, caught between awe and horror. He had freed something powerful. Maybe too powerful. The beast tore through the guards like they were nothing, then pushed through the shattered doorway. Its heavy footfalls faded into the deep corridors beyond. Ethan shook himself out of his trance. He knew he should run the other way toward his extraction point, but something made him follow. He moved quickly, keeping to the shadows, the pounding alarm masking the sound of his boots. He caught glimpses of the creature ahead, its huge frame ducking under low doorways, its chains dragging like broken anchors. More alien soldiers poured in from all sides. The beast was unstoppable, plowing through them with sheer brute force. It didn't kill just to kill, it moved with purpose, smashing only those who blocked its path. Ethan noticed something strange. Every few moments, the beast's red glow flickered, replaced by a brief pulse of blue. It was as if something inside it was fighting for control. Then, a booming metallic voice echoed through the facilities. Speakers, it spoke in the alien tongue, but Ethan recognized the tone: command, authority, and rage. Every alien soldier froze for a moment, then redoubled their efforts to stop the beast. Ethan ducked behind a support beam, scanning for where the voice might be coming from. The beast, meanwhile, crashed into another security gate, tearing it apart with its claws. Beyond it was an open hangar, vast space lit by the pale light of an alien moon. Ethan stepped to the edge, and his stomach tightened. The hangar wasn't empty. Sleek black ships were parked inside, their engines humming as if ready for launch, and in the center, a massive armored figure stood waiting. The figure's armor gleamed with dark silver plates, its helmet shaped like a predator's skull. In one hand, it held a long staff tipped with a blade crackling with electric energy. Even from here, Ethan could feel the presence: cold, calculating, and dangerous. The beast stopped in its tracks, growling low. The armored figure tilted its head slightly, then spoke in that same commanding tone from the speakers. The words were alien, but the meaning was clear: obedience, submission. To Ethan's shock, the beast lowered its head. "I'll The chains around its wrists dragged against the hangar floor as it slowly stepped toward the armored figure. Its roar was gone now, replaced by heavy, almost controlled breathing. Ethan realized with a chill was its master. The figure raised its staff, and the red glow in the beast's eyes pulsed brighter. It was under complete control again. Ethan's mind raced. If this was the master, then freeing the beast hadn't saved it had only returned it to the worst possible hands. From somewhere above, a squad of alien soldiers rappelled down. Blocking the hangar exits, Ethan was trapped. But he didn't care about himself at that moment. His eyes stayed fixed on the beast. He could still see flickers of blue deep within. Its crimson glare simulated desperate bursts of resistance, whatever the master was doing. It wasn't perfect. The beast wasn't entirely gone. Yet the master turned sharply, speaking into a communicator on his wrist. Ethan heard a faint hum, and suddenly, every ship in the hangar began activating. Engines roared to life through the hangar doors. Ethan caught sight of a sprawling alien city beyond the cliffs, thousands of lights twinkling in the distance. His stomach dropped. He didn't need to understand their language to know what was about to happen. The beast wasn't just being taken away. It was about to be unleashed on that city. Ethan's hands clenched. He had no plan, no backup, and no way out, but he knew one thing. He couldn't just stand there and let this happen. The armored figure gave a sharp, final command, and the beast began moving toward one of the ships. The ground shook with each step. And Ethan, pressed against the shadows, whispered to himself, "Not if I can help it." The hunt begins. The night outside the alien facility was cold and sharp, the air carrying the scent of strange plants and distant storms. Ethan slipped through the shadows of the rocky cliffs, his eyes fixed on the flicker of movement far ahead. The beast was no longer rampaging. It moved with a slow, deliberate pace now, following its master like a trained war animal. Chains still clinked against the ground with each step, and the sound echoed faintly through the alien jungle from his vantage point. Ethan could see the path they were taking. The master's towering figure walked at the front, and a squad of armed soldiers flanked them on both sides. They weren't moving toward the alien city. Immediately, they were heading deeper into the jungle. That gave Ethan a chance. He could follow unseen, figure out what they were planning, and maybe find a way to take the beast back from the Warlord's control. But every step he took was a gamble. The alien jungle was alive in ways that made his skin crawl. Massive trees with twisted roots pulsed faintly under the moonlight. Like they were breathing, strange insect-like creatures with glassy wings hummed in the branches, their eyes glowing in the dark. Every so often, the silence was broken by a distant, bone-chilling howl that didn't belong to the beast. Ethan kept low, moving from shadow to shadow. His mind was full of questions. What was the beast before it was captured? How had it ended up in chains? And why, when he cut the wires, had it looked at him like it recognized him? It made no sense. Still, he knew one thing. Those flickers of blue he'd seen in its eyes were a sign. Some part of it was fighting back against the control, and maybe, just maybe, he could reach that part again. The Warlord's voice cut through the night, deep, guttural, and commanding. It wasn't just speech. It was like a leash, tugging at the beast's mind each time he spoke. The red glow in the beast's eyes grew brighter, the blue flickers fading. Ethan's stomach tightened. Time was running out. They finally reached a clearing. In the middle stood an ancient alien structure, overgrown with vines, but still humming faintly with power. Strange spires jutted from the ground. Covered in glowing alien runes, the soldiers formed a perimeter while the Warlord approached the center of the structure. The beast stood motionless, as if waiting for orders from his hiding spot behind a moss-covered boulder. Ethan studied the scene. The Warlord raised his staff, and energy crackled between the spires. A holographic map formed in the air above the Met showed the alien city highlighted in bright red. Lines of light pulsed from the jungle toward the city. It wasn't a random attack. They were planning a direct assault through some hidden path. And the beast was going to lead it. Ethan's pulse quickened. If he could disrupt this meeting, maybe he could buy time. He reached for his sidearm, but stopped when he saw the beast's head shift slightly. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but its gaze moved toward the jungle toward him. For a moment, their eyes met through the shadows. A faint glimmer of blue flashed in its crimson glow. Ethan's breath caught. The beast remembered him. He didn't know how, but it did. The Warlord, oblivious to this, was still giving orders to his troops. The soldiers were adjusting their weapons. Preparing for the march, Ethan took a risk. He pulled a small, palm-sized device from his Beltan EMP charge. It wasn't strong enough to destroy tech, but it could short-circuit control systems temporarily. If the beast's implants were even partly mechanical, this could give it a few seconds of freedom. He set the timer for 10 seconds, crawled forward, and tossed it under one of the spires. The Warlord must have sensed something, because his head snapped toward the sound. Ethan dove behind the boulder again, just as the device went off. A sharp pulse of blue-white light flashed across the clearing. The holographic map shattered into static. The spire's glow sputtered. And the beast roared a sound that was different from before. It wasn't the controlled bellow of a weapon. It was raw, furious, and alive. The Warlord barked an order, but the beast didn't move to obey. Instead, it turned its head fully toward Ethan's hiding spot. The red in its eyes clashing violently with sudden bursts of blue. The soldiers raised their weapons, unsure whether to aim at the beast or the unseen intruder. The Warlord's voice grew louder, sharper, trying to force obedience back into the creature. Ethan knew this was his chance if he could close the distance. Maybe he could cut more of those control wires. He dashed from his cover, weaving through the chaos. The beast snarled not at him, but at the soldiers who stepped in his way. It swatted one aside, sending him flying into the trees for a brief, insane moment. Ethan felt like they were fighting on the same side, but then the Warlord struck the ground with his staff. A surge of red energy rippled through the clearing, slamming into the beast like a physical blow. The blue in its eyes faded. Fast, swallowed by crimson, it staggered, growling low, and turned its head back toward the Warlord. Ethan skidded to a stop, his heart sinking. He was too slow. The Warlord's gaze fell on him, and even through the alien helmet. Ethan could feel the weight of it, cold and deadly. "You," the Warlord growled in perfect, chilling English, "will regret that." The soldiers began closing in. Weapons aimed, the beast stood still again, like a statue of metal and muscle. And Ethan realized the hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun. The Warlord's arrival, the clearing seemed to shrink under the weight of the Warlord's presence. Even the jungle had gone silent. The usual hum of alien insects replaced by the crackle of energy pulsing from his staff. Ethan's breath came slow and controlled, his mind racing for options. The soldiers moved in a half-circle around him, their black armor glinting under the pale moonlight, weapons aimed and ready. The Warlord stepped forward, each heavy footfall sinking slightly into the damp earth. Up close, he was even more intimidating, nearly 8 feet tall, his armor an intricate weave of alien alloys and scarred battle plating. His helmet resembled the skull of some predatory beast, complete with jagged protrusions like horns. The faint hum from the staff in his hand wasn't just for show, radiated a pressure that made Ethan's skin prickle. Behind the Warlord, the beast stood frozen. Its chest heaved slowly, eyes locked forward, glowing red with an intensity that made it seem almost lifeless again. It wasn't roaring, it wasn't struggling, just still. Ethan hated that stillness more than the violence. It meant the Warlord's control was absolute, at least for now. The Warlord's voice cut through the air. "You are the human who freed it," he said in accented but flawless English. "Tell me, did you think that was an act of mercy? Or did you simply want to watch it kill?" His tone wasn't curious, it was mocking. Ethan didn't answer. Part of him wanted to spit back something sharp, but another part knew he needed to stay alive. Long enough to make a difference. The Warlord tilted his head slightly, studying Ethan the way one might study an insect. Then, with a slow gesture, he pointed the staff at him. The beast's head turned, the crimson glow in its eyes brightening. Its claws flexed slightly, metal scraping against metal. "End him," the Warlord ordered. Ethan's heart pounded. The beast began moving forward, each step heavy and deliberate. He took a step back. His mind scrambling for a plan. The EMP earlier had worked, but only for a few seconds, too short to free the beast entirely. He needed something bigger, something that could overload the Warlord's control signal completely before the beast could close the distance. One of the soldiers stepped forward. Grabbing Ethan by the arm and forcing him to his knees, the Warlord approached, looming over him. "You have two choices, human," he said. "Join my forces as an engineer, or die here, feeding the soil of this worthless world." Ethan felt the cold barrel of a soldier's weapon press against the back of his neck. For a moment, he almost considered pretending to agree, buying himself time, but then his eyes flicked toward the beast, even through the solid red glow. He caught at the faintest flicker of blue again, buried deep. It was still in there, fighting. That was all he needed to commit. "I'm not joining you," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. The Warlord's grip on his staff tightened. For a second, Ethan thought he might actually strike him down on the spot. But instead, the Warlord laughed deep, guttural, humorless. "You think you can stop me, little human. You think you can save it," he said, gesturing to the beast. "It is mine. It has always been mine." The Warlord raised his staff high, and a wave of crimson energy surged out. It rippled over the beast's body, making its limbs twitch violently. The blue flicker vanished, replaced by a pure, obedient red. The Warlord didn't notice the small device Ethan had just slipped from his sleeve into the dirt beside him. It was a modified pulse charge, a one-shot overload. Powerful, but unstable. Ethan waited until the Warlord stepped closer. Then he rolled forward, breaking free from the soldier's grip, and slammed his boot onto the device's trigger. A blinding burst of white-blue light exploded outward. The shockwave knocked soldiers back and sent the Warlord stumbling. The beast roared, not in pain, but in something closer to freedom, for the first time. The chains hanging from its limbs rattled as it moved without command. Its red eyes flared with streaks of bright blue. It swung one massive claw, crushing two soldiers in a single blow. The Warlord recovered quickly, slamming his staff into the ground. The shockwave he sent out rippled the air, but this time the beast resisted, its claws digging into the dirt. Ethan didn't waste the moment. He sprinted toward the tree line, hoping the beast would follow. But instead, the beast lunged not at him, but at the Warlord. Their clash shook the ground, metal against alien alloy, claws against energy shield. Sparks flew in every direction, the air thick with the sound of roars and the hum of the Warlord's weapon. Soldiers scrambled to regroup, firing wildly at the beast. But their shots either bounced off its armored plating or were swatted aside by its massive claws. The Warlord's shield flickered under the beast's relentless strikes. Ethan knew he couldn't take either of them head-on, but he could still help tip the balance. From the shadows, he scanned the battlefield. The Warlord's staff wasn't just a weapon, it was the source of control. If he could damage it, maybe the beast would break free completely. He spotted a fallen soldier's plasma rifle nearby and dove for it, rolling across the dirt to grab it. The weapon was heavy, alien tech buzzing in his hands, but it powered Up instantly, he aimed at the glowing core of the staff. The warlord saw the motion and shifted his stance. Too late, Ethan fired, and the plasma bolt struck the staff dead-on. The weapon sparked violently, its glow faltering. The beast roared with renewed fury, the red in its eyes fading fast. The warlord's helmet tilted toward Ethan, his voice cold as stone. "You've just doomed yourself," he growled. Ethan tightened his grip on the rifle. "Maybe," he said, "but I've also doomed you." The warlord stepped back, calling for reinforcements. The beast turned fully toward Ethan now, eyes a swirling mix of red and blue, and for a brief moment, it didn't look like a weapon at all. It looked free. Turning the beast the clearing was chaos. The warlord barked commands in his guttural tongue, his voice cutting through the crackle of gunfire and the beast's thunderous roars. Alien soldiers scrambled to regroup, forming a loose circle around their leader, but their weapons hesitated to fire. Reach missed, shot wrist, hitting the beast. And that hesitation was the only thing keeping Ethan alive. The beast towered over them all, its massive chest rising and falling. Its eyes were no longer solid red. Now they swirled with streaks of bright, flickering blue that cut through the crimson glow. It looked confused, torn between two masters. The warlord gripped his damaged staff tighter, sparks still spitting from its cracked core. Every time he raised it, the red in the beast's eyes flared. But then it would flicker again, as if something deep inside was resisting. Ethan ducked behind a shattered piece of alien machinery, his mind racing. If he didn't act fast, the warlord would regain full control. He remembered the brief connection he'd felt back in the facility when he'd cut the wires and the beast had looked at him. Not with rage, but with recognition. That flicker of blue wasn't just random, it meant the creature could think for itself, and if it could think, it could choose. His gaze swept the battlefield. A soldier's pack had fallen nearby, spilling glowing power cells into the dirt. An idea formed dangerous, but maybe the only shot. If he could get close enough, he could feed raw energy into the beast's cybernetic implants and override the warlord's signal completely. It wouldn't be permanent, but it might give the creature a clear mind long enough to turn the fight. Ethan slung the alien plasma rifle over his shoulder and dashed for the fallen pack. Two soldiers spotted him and opened fire. Bolts of green plasma scorched the ground inches from his boots. He slid behind a thick root jutting from the earth, snatched up the glowing power cell, and tucked it into his vest. The hum of its unstable energy vibrated against his chest. This was going to hurt. For both him and the beast, the warlord noticed. "Him then, you persist," he snarled, his voice amplified through his helmet. "You don't understand what you're playing with, human. It is mine. It will always be mine." Ethan didn't respond. He was already moving, weaving between debris, getting closer to the beast. The creature's head turned sharply as he approached. A low growl rumbled in its chest, but there was hesitation in its stance. The warlord shouted another command, and the red in the beast's eyes flared bright again, its claws flexed, digging into the dirt as it took a step toward Ethan. For a moment, Ethan thought it was going to strike. He stopped in his tracks, raising both hands slowly. "I'm not your enemy," he said, voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "You know me. You know I freed you." The beast tilted its head, the blue flicker returning for a heartbeat. Ethan took that as his opening. He reached into his vest and pulled out the power cell. Its glow bathed them both in pale light. "I can help you," he said, holding it up. The beast's gaze locked onto it, nostrils flaring. Ethan could feel heat radiating from the creature now, the hum of its implants vibrating in the air between them. The warlord roared in anger, charging forward with his staff raised. But before he could close the distance, the beast's massive claw swung not at Ethan, but at the warlord. The blow struck the warlord's energy shield, sending sparks cascading into the air. Ethan didn't hesitate. He leaped forward and pressed the power cell against the base of the beast's neck. Right where the wires met flesh, the reaction was immediate. A blinding surge of blue light shot through the beast's implants. It let out a roar so loud it rattled the spires around the clearing. The red in its eyes shattered, replaced by a pure burning blue that lit the night. Its chains snapped completely. Not from strength this time, but from the raw energy overload. The warlord staggered back, his control severed. The beast turned fully toward him, its movements no longer stiff or mechanical. This was no weapon. Now this was a living, thinking creature. It snarled, lips curling back to reveal rows of gleaming teeth. The soldiers hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. They had trained to fight under the warlord's command. But none had been prepared for a beast acting on its own will. One soldier broke rank and fired only to be swatted aside by a casual flick of the beast's claw. The rest began to retreat, their discipline crumbling. Ethan stepped back, his chest heaving. He could hardly believe it had worked. The beast's gaze shifted to him again, but now there was no hostility. It lowered its massive head slightly. Almost in acknowledgement, Ethan nodded once, a silent understanding passing between them. The warlord wasn't finished. He adjusted his grip on the cracked staff. His voice low and venomous. "You think you've won, human? You've only made it more dangerous." He pressed something on his wrist plate, and a low rumble echoed through the jungle. From the darkness beyond the clearing, shapes began to emerge like quadrupedal war machines, their bodies bristling with weapons. The beast stepped forward, placing itself between Ethan and the incoming threat. Its blue-lit eyes never left the warlord. Ethan felt a strange sense of certainty in that moment. This creature, once enslaved, was now his only ally, and together they were about to face something even worse than what they had just survived. The warlord raised his staff, the jungle trembling with the sound of approaching metal. Ethan tightened his grip on the rifle, glancing up at the beast. "Guess we're in this together now," he muttered. The beast's answer was a deep, resonant growl that promised the fight was far from over. War in the city, the night sky above. The alien jungle lit up in flashes of red and blue as the first of the warlord's war machines lunged into the clearing. Each one was a nightmare of polished black armor and jagged metal edges. Their forelegs moving with predatory precision. Mounted plasma cannons swiveled toward Ethan and the beast. Glowing ominously in the dark, their targeting beams swept across the ground, settling on the two unlikely allies. Ethan gritted his teeth. Clutching the alien rifle tight, the beast's massive frame lowered, muscles tensing under the mix of fur and cybernetic plating. Its blue-lit eyes burned with a wild freedom Ethan hadn't seen before. And when the first war machine fired, the beast was already in motion. It leaped forward with shocking speed. Closing the distance in a single bound, its claws tore through the war machine's side. Ripping apart layers of alien alloy like wet paper, the machine screamed in unholy. Mechanical while acid toppled into the dirt, sparks spilling from its ruined body. But there were more, for others circled, their movements perfectly coordinated. Ethan fired burst after burst from the plasma rifle, hitting joints and sensors. One machine faltered, stumbling as its targeting system sparked. The beast used the opening, smashing its head down onto the machine and snapping its spine-like frame in two. The warlord stood at the far end of the clearing, his cracked staff now dark. He didn't need to control the beast anymore. Now he wanted to destroy it. His wristplate glowed as he sent new commands to the remaining machines. They broke formation, charging all at once. "Move!" Ethan shouted, diving to the side as a spray of plasma fire tore through the ground where he'd been standing. The beast spun, using its tail-thick, armored, and heavy to slam one machine into another, the impact shattering both. But the Last one managed to leap onto its back, claws digging into the seams between metal plates. The beast roared in pain, thrashing violently. Ethan didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the struggling creature. Firing a controlled burst at the machine's exposed power core, the shot struck true, and the machine exploded in a shower of sparks. The blast sent Ethan rolling across the ground, ears ringing, when he pushed himself up. The clearing was silent, except for the crackle of burning wreckage. The beast stood breathing heavily, smoke curling from its claws. Its blue glow was steady now. Not flickering, not fighting for control, Ethan realized with a jolt. The Warlord's influence was completely gone, but there was no time to celebrate. In the distance, over the jungle canopy, the alien city glimmered with thousands of lights. And beyond the cliffs, the rumble of engines filled the air. Dropships, dozens of them, were already descending toward the city. Ethan's mind raced. The Warlord's forces weren't retreating. They were moving the fight to the city, if they got there first. Millions could die. The beast looked toward the city, then down at Ethan. It gave a short, sharp grunt, most like a question. Ethan didn't know if it truly understood his words, but he nodded anyway. "Yeah," he said, "we're going there." Without warning, the beast crouched low. Ethan realized what it meant a second too late. Wait, it surged forward. And Ethan barely managed to grab onto one of the thick cables running along its armored shoulder. The world blurred as the beast bounded through the jungle, each leap covering impossible distance. Branches whipped past, the ground dropping and rising beneath them. Ethan's grip tightened, the wind tearing at his face. They broke through the last line of trees onto a ridge below. The alien city sprawled across the valley floor, tall. Jagged towers of glass and steel, glowing streets winding like rivers of light. But it wasn't peaceful. Explosions lit the horizon as the Warlord's dropships touched down. Unleashing waves of black armored soldiers, hover tanks glided between the buildings, their cannons firing into the sky. The beast didn't slow. It charged down the ridge, the ground shaking. With each massive stride, Ethan raised the rifle and started firing at anything that moved toward them. The first enemy squad never had a chance. The beast slammed into them, scattering bodies and weapons across the street. Civilians, Leon and human alike, were fleeing. In all directions, their panicked cries filled the air. One small alien child tripped in the chaos, frozen in fear as a soldier aimed at her. Ethan's shot dropped the soldier instantly. The child stared wide-eyed at him before being pulled away by her mother. They fought street by street. The beast ripped through hover tanks, tearing off turrets and flipping them onto their sides. Ethan used its back as a moving platform, picking off soldiers from above. They were an unstoppable force. And every time the beast looked back at him, Ethan saw less of a mindless monster and more of a partner, but the Warlord was nowhere to be seen. Ethan knew that wasn't a good sign. Someone like him wouldn't just sit back and watch his forces. He'd be preparing something bigger, something catastrophic. As they neared the city's central plaza, the ground began to tremble, not from the beast's movement, but from something deeper. Ethan scanned the skyline and froze. From behind the tallest tower, a massive shape was rising, an armored war machine the size of a building. Its body glowed with the same crimson energy the Warlord had used to control the beast. And strapped to its front was a weapon so large it made the city's tallest buildings look small. The beast stopped, its blue eyes narrowing at the sight. Ethan tightened his grip on the rifle. "This is it," he said, more to himself than to the creature. The war in the city had only just begun, and the final battle was going to decide everything's freedom or complete destruction. The final choice. The ground shook like an earthquake as the colossal war machine fully emerged from behind the tallest tower. Its armored legs slammed into the city streets, crushing entire vehicles underfoot. Red energy pulsed through glowing veins in its armor, casting a hellish light across the plaza from high above. The warlord stood on a platform built into its head, staff raised, his voice booming over the chaos. "This city will kneel, or it will burn." He roared in perfect, venomous English. The massive weapon mounted to the machine's chest began to hum. Building up a blinding crimson glow, Ethan didn't need to guess that cannon fired. It would obliterate half the city in a single blast. The beast's muscles tensed beneath him, its blue-lit eyes locked on the towering monstrosity. Ethan could feel the vibration of its growl through his boots, a deep, dangerous sound that promised violence. He leaned forward, gripping the thick cables along its shoulder. "We have to stop him now," he muttered, though he wasn't sure if the beast understood the words or just the tone. They charged, weaving through the burning streets as debris rained down from collapsing buildings. Alien soldiers tried to block their path, but they were swept aside either by the beast's claws or Ethan's precise plasma shots. Every second counted. The glow from the war machine's cannon getting brighter, louder, hungrier. When they broke into the central plaza, the war machine turned to face them. It was even more massive up close, its shadow swallowing the street. The warlord looked down, his voice dripping with scorn. "You think your stolen pet can challenge me?" He sneered. "It is still mine, human. I only have to speak the word." Ethan's chest tightened, but he saw no flicker of red in the beast's eyes, now only defiant blue. The warlord's voice carried no weight anymore. This creature wasn't. His weapon now was free. The cannon fired its first test shot. A beam of molten crimson that sliced through a nearby tower. The building collapsed in a roar of concrete and fire, showering the streets in dust and rubble. Ethan's pulse quickened there. Wouldn't be time for a second shot like that. The beast lunged, its claws raking across the war machine's leg, tearing deep into the armor. The entire machine staggered, metal groaning under the force of the blah. But the warlord didn't flinch. He slammed his staff down, sending a wave of red energy into the war machine systems. The massive leg pistons hissed and realigned, the damage already repairing. Ethan's mind raced. This thing wasn't just metal. It was alive with alien tech. They couldn't win by tearing it apart piece by piece. They had to hit the core, the same way they destroyed the warlord's control over the beast. He spotted it glowing at the center of the war machine's chest, just behind the cannon housing. If they could overload that, the entire thing would collapse. He leaned down toward the beast's ear. "We need to get me up there," he said. Pointing to the core, the beast followed his gesture, then lowered itself slightly. Ethan knew what that meant. "All right," he muttered. "Don't drop me." With a sudden burst of strength, the beast leaped. Claws digging into the war machine's leg plating, it began to climb, using the armor as a ladder. Tearing handholds where none existed, bolts of plasma from defending soldiers whizzed past Ethan's head, but he held tight. The city below became a blur of fire and shadow as they ascended. Halfway up, the warlord spotted them. His staff crackled with red lightning, and he swung it toward them. The blast struck the beast's side, making it roar in pain. Ethan almost lost his grip, but held on, teeth gritted. "Come on, keep going," he shouted. The beast pushed through the pain, reaching the cannon's housing. Ethan leaped from its shoulder onto a narrow ledge beside the glowing core. The heat coming off it was intense. Like standing too close to a forge, he ripped a power cell from his belt, the last one, and jammed it into a gap between the glowing plates. The warlord's eyes widened under his helmet. "No," he roared, leaping from his perch and swinging his staff toward Ethan. The human ducked just in time, the staff's tip smashing into the metal beside his head. Sparks showered them both as the power cell began to whine, building to an unstable E-weed. To an unstable pitch, Ethan turned toward the beast. "Now?" he yelled. The creature's massive claw swiped upward, catching the warlord and sending him flying across the plaza. The impact shattered the far wall, his staff skittering across the ground. Its glow dying, the power cell overloaded. A surge of blue-white energy erupted from the core, tearing through the war machine systems. Its legs buckled. The cannon's red glow flickered and died. For a moment, the entire massive construct froze. Then it collapsed in on itself, crashing into the plaza with an earth-shaking roar. Ethan barely managed to leap back onto the beast's shoulder as the wreckage fell. They landed hard on the cracked street below, dust and fire filling the air when it cleared. The warlord was gone, neither buried under the rubble or fled into the shadows. The city was quiet now, save for the distant crackle of flames. Civilians emerged cautiously from hiding, their wide eyes fixed on the massive beast standing in their plaza. Some looked afraid, others in awe. The beast lowered its head toward Ethan, its glowing blue eyes calm. He reached out, resting a hand on the warm, scarred metal of its face. "You're free now," he said softly. The beast gave a low, rumbling growl, not of threat, but of agreement. They stood together in the ruins. Two survivors bound by something no warlord could ever control, and as the alien sun began to rise over the city, Ethan knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side.